Hello, my name is Gil Penalosa, and this is Cities for Everyone, the webinar. Every other Tuesday, I invite fascinating people from around the world to share experiences and knowledge that will help us create affordable, equitable, and sustainable cities. I was born in Bogota, Colombia, where as commissioner, I led the design and construction of over 200 parks and took a small program called Ciclovia, Open Streets, and increased it to over 120 kilometers, 75 miles of car-free streets every Sunday and holiday, where more than 1 million people walk, bike, run, shop, enjoying the presence of each other. 17 years ago, I created 880 Cities, a non-profit organization based in Toronto, Canada, where I live. Last year, I ran for mayor and came second with 100,000 votes. My aim was to change the conversation in creating a Toronto for everyone. I've been fortunate to have worked in over 350 cities in all continents, sharing and learning. Based on all experiences, I developed master classes and keynotes customized to each city. But Cities for Everyone, the webinar, is a way of giving back. It's always free and hopefully always interesting. Please invite others to join us every other Tuesday, anyone who cares about cities and people, equity and sustainability, about all living older, healthier, and happier. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are. We have people from around the world, from Paraguay and Brazil and Mexico, many from the US and Canada, but also Belgium and Denmark and Kenya and South Africa, from all over, because today's topic is applicable to every city, small ones and large ones, rich and poor. It's about safe streets. Safe streets around the world every year. Over 1.3 million people are killed in traffic incidents. And not everybody is the same. Even within the same city, it's not the same, the neighborhoods of where the wealthy people lived and the low-income people, by race, by ethnicity, by social, economic background. So we're talking about safe streets and advancing equity. And we're going to talk about two cities, Hoboken in New Jersey and Seattle in Washington. And we have three wonderful guests. We have Allison Schwartz and Bradley Topol from Seattle, and we have Ryan Sharp from Hoboken. So I want to thank the three of you for having accepted the invitation, and people are here is to listen to you, to learn from you. Thank you for coming.
Great. All right. Thank you all. Again, my name is Ryan Sharp. I am the Director of Transportation and Parking for the city of Hoboken, New Jersey. If we were in person right now, I'd probably ask everyone to raise their hand if you'd ever been to Hoboken before, or if you were at least familiar with Hoboken. But because this is virtual, I'm going to spend about a minute or two just sharing a little bit of background about Hoboken for anyone who's not familiar with the city. So Hoboken is a relatively small city of about 60,000 people located on the west side of the Hudson River, directly across from New York City. On this little map here, it's Hoboken in red. And to the right, you can see the borough of Manhattan. That's Midtown right there. So funny enough, Hoboken's actually closer geographically to Midtown Manhattan in the heart of New York City than most of the rest of the outer boroughs. As a result, Hoboken is often referred to as the sixth borough of New York City. Hoboken has fantastic public transportation connections to New York City as well that helps facilitate that connection that people have with New York. About 60% of workers actually commuted by public transportation in Hoboken pre-COVID. That number has gone down a little bit due to more people working from home, but it's still a very high number relative to most places in the US at least. Hoboken is a very walkable city, as you'll see in some photos and a video I'm going to show you in a moment. Hoboken's a pretty youthful city. About 50% of the population is 18 to 34 years old. Hoboken's also the birthplace of Frank Sinatra, famous musician, and the birthplace of baseball, actually. Here's an aerial of Hoboken, looking from roughly the perspective of Lower Manhattan. And there's a statue of Frank Sinatra himself on the Hoboken waterfront. And on the right here, we have the intersection of 11th Street and Washington Street in Hoboken. And where you see that baseball diamond in the middle of the intersection, this is allegedly approximately where the first game of baseball was ever played over 100 years ago, back long before these buildings were here. So Hoboken's been in the news, certainly in North America, a fair amount over the last couple of years for a very positive reason. That's that Hoboken has gone 6 consecutive years now without a traffic death on its public streets. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a moment and share some video that kind of shows some of the things that we've been doing. But I think it's important to mention kind of the two major contributing factors, in my opinion, that have helped kind of achieve the streak so far. And the first is a lot of good fortune. Planners and engineers, love to feel like we are in control of our environment, and that, if only we just did a little bit more, we redesigned all of our streets a certain way, or we reduced our speed limit. Those things are fantastic. And I'm going to show you some of those things that are happening in Hoboken. And I know you'll hear about it more in Seattle as well after me. But there are limitations to what we can control. We can't control the human behavior. We can't control necessarily the size or speed of vehicles that are on our streets, and other factors. So the fact that we have gone 6 consecutive years without even a fluke crash resulting in a traffic death, we're extremely grateful and feel very fortunate for that to happen. With that said, secondly, I do also believe very firmly that part of the reason that we've made it 6+ years without a traffic death is a result of over 13 years now of very deliberate actions that have been taken with a goal of reducing and eliminating traffic violence in Hoboken and trying to make streets more livable, more people-oriented, and safer and more accommodating for all modes of transportation. So with that said, how do we get there? What are some of the things that we've been doing in Hoboken? And one common theme that you'll see through the video I'm about to share and a couple slides afterwards is that not a lot of the things that are happening here are things that can't be done in any city, anywhere in the world, frankly. Really, the focus is on doing what I call kind of fundamental strategies, right? The basics, and doing them efficiently and doing them effectively and consistently over time. And then eventually the sum of those actions leads to something very significant. So to help me kind of share some of this story, I'm going to play a video. It's about 4 minutes long, put together by Clarence Eckerson Jr., who actually, Gil, was on your show or your webinar just a couple weeks ago, talking about his street film collection. He's filmed over 1,000 videos from cities all over the world, documenting transportation advocacy and kind of the livable streets movement, so to speak. And this video that I'm showing you here was one of his most popular videos from 2022.
Yeah, he told us about this video, and Brian, something that is great. I want people to realize that when Hoboken has only 60,000 people, if you are from a city of 10 million people, think of this as your neighborhood. You can make a ward, you can make a neighborhood, you can make a zone, you can make an area. Also, because small cities must become safe. They're not safe just because they're small. So whether you are in a city, everything that Ryan is talking is as applicable to a city of 10 million people or to a city of 60,000. And yes, Ryan, Clarence was here and he mentioned this. And the idea is when people think that an image is worth 1,000 words, well, then the videos are worth like 1,000,000 words. So go ahead.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to show the video. So hopefully it lives up to the 1,000,000 words. So here we go.
Welcome to Hoboken. So I'm Tom. I am Amy's husband. We both live in New Jersey, and we find it really nice to bike over here. So as a part of the Vision Zero Cities Conference, we thought it'd be a really great idea to showcase some of the cool stuff happening on this side of the Hudson River.
We're going to see a lot of different types of projects, whether it's pedestrian safety focused or bike focused or placemaking or green infrastructure. We're very fortunate to have gone over 5 years without a single traffic death in Hoboken. And, you know, there's a lot of work still to be done. We know that can change at any time. So we're making sure that we're not putting our pencils down and being happy with that progress. This section right here used to be parking. There's so much traffic here. When I say traffic, I mean mostly pedestrian traffic, people pushing strollers, people on bikes, joggers, that during peak periods in the evening when there's nice weather or on Saturday mornings, people will spill into the travel lane because there's no space. So we took out parking here for one weekend. We did it as a quick build pilot. We put up a little poster here. People could use a QR code or a website to vote on whether they liked it, they didn't like it, they want to keep it permanently or just during weekends or the summer. We received hundreds and hundreds of responses. And overwhelmingly, I think it was like 75 or 80% of people wanted it to be permanent. But one thing we're proud of is our relationship with Hudson County. And actually, we're on a county road right now, Hudson Street. And up there is Hudson Street and 14th Street. So the county is upgrading the traffic signals there right now. And because we have a complete streets program, they've agreed to also build curb extensions into that project.
You were able to watch on 14 and Hudson, where we had a traffic signal upgrade. As part of that project, they also included 4 bump outs that are rain gardens.
So green infrastructure, drainage improvements, streetscape, and pedestrian safety improvements all in one.
I love the daylighting. I live in a neighborhood up in the Heights where they had none of it, and it was literally terrifying to try and cross the street. Because you would inch out to try and see, and then the traffic was going so fast. It's a stark difference walking from Hoboken and going just steps up the hill, the Heights.
Yeah.
They don't stop for pedestrians up there. The trash is a big problem, but they're fixing it, little by little. Now we're getting daylighting up there, and it makes a huge difference.
They do a lot of that here. This town's very good about bump outs and
That's like the one like
pedestrian
unintended
treatments in
benefit of
general.
So right now we are on a fairly new curb extension. It's really large because of the angled parking that we have here. Around 2013, where we are right now was a painted curb extension. Had vertical delineator posts around the edge. Same thing for that corner over there. We partnered with the county. We got them to pay for upgrading those curb extensions that were painted to the concrete that you see today.
There's so many curb extensions in Hoboken. Every time they redo an intersection, basically, they put one in. They're just everywhere. We literally saw them being built as we passed by. It was amazing. New Jersey law is that you can't park within 25 feet of an intersection, and they actually enforce it, and everyone follows the rules. We have the same law in New York State, but New York City DOT has just decided we don't have to follow the rules.
This is the intersection of 4th and Garden Street. That's an elementary school and a park. And so again, this is somewhere where we prioritize a more significant pedestrian safety set of investments because of the proximity that we have here to these 2 different land uses that attract the most vulnerable people in our community. The most significant investment right here on the school corner, which is the curb extension rain gardens. Then we have a bike corral, which is probably the cheapest one right across the street.
The plan is that every time we mill and pave a road, it's not just blacktop. It's also looking at all the users. The ADA ramps, can we include complete streets, bike lanes? In every intersection where we can, we add a bump out if we can make it work with the turning radiuses.
Oh yeah. This is Observer Highway right here. It's the main arterial into the southern part of Hoboken. Before 2015, this was a 4-lane undivided highway with an adjacent service road. It was very hostile to any other form of transportation other than cars. We ended up making this a road diet. So now we have 2 lanes, 1 lane in each direction with a center turn lane and a 2-way protected bikeway. And the brown section here is a pedestrian walkway.
Before the 4 lanes, undivided, that's what we've got everywhere. That's where people are dying, And if you had something like this, it totally changed the game.
And then typically,
Okay. me get back into the rest of the presentation. So can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So thanks again to Clarence for giving me the okay to show that video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I love that little snippet because I think it does a really good job showing kind of the sum of the parts creating more of a whole, right? That's a little showcase of what 13 years of incremental improvements through a complete streets program look like basically over time, and how that can change the culture of a community because people get used to seeing these things. And it can start small with a pilot project or a quick build, which I'm showing on the screen now here. This is an example of daylighting all the way back in 2009. And what I mean by daylighting, it's basically installing some kind of infrastructure. It could be paint, but more effectively could be flexible bollards or bike corrals or curb extensions, like you saw in the video, to physically keep cars from parking too close to crosswalks. And that helps maintain sight lines at corners and crosswalks. So any form of intersecting mode of transportation can have more reaction time, and there's a greater likelihood that they will stop for someone if they're in a crosswalk or there's a bike crossing through the intersection, or et cetera. So, you know, whether it's a pilot project or a quick build, if you don't have a lot of resources to build something more substantial like rain gardens and bump outs, that's certainly a very effective approach that we've used in Hoboken as well. Again, we're a smaller city. We don't have $1 billion budget to do transportation projects. This is current Mayor Bala when he was a city council member on Sinatra Drive. And that shows a little Earth Day pilot sign that was focused on in the video that I showed you before, that became a permanent multi-use path after doing this pilot. Didn't have the money to do a bump out with concrete in the picture on the right, so we did a painted version of it. Cheap and quick, but has about 85% of the benefits of the concrete bump out. Just a few other examples, right? This is basic stuff, right? Focusing on reducing pedestrian crossing distances and slowing vehicle speeds before and after, simply adding a pedestrian island with RRFB signage. Again, trying to reduce pedestrian crossing distances. You have a really wide crossing on a busy retail corridor, and just by adding an expanded sidewalk, some placemaking with a rain garden, which also doubles or triples as a drainage improvement, enhanced bus stops, a bike lane, the traffic signals are reprogrammed very cost effectively to have leading pedestrian intervals so that pedestrians have a 7-second head start into the crosswalk without any conflicting movements from turning vehicles. Providing safe and dedicated bike facilities for people to ride bikes or scooters or other micromobility devices. This is before on the left and after on the right. This is Observer Highway, which you saw at the end of that video. Connecting communities together. So this is a protected bikeway that connects with our community, with our neighbor to the south, Jersey City, so that we have that continuous network of protected bike lanes, which Gil mentioned at the beginning is very important. And then trying to manage speeds, having a citywide 20-mile-per-hour speed limit. So we are trying to design our streets to feel like you have to drive slower, right? Slower design speeds. And then pairing that with regulatory requirements and actual law that reduces the speed limit to 20 miles per hour citywide, right? We know that, you know, just going from 25 to 20 miles per hour, you're reducing the stopping distance for most people by a significant amount, right? 85 feet at 25 miles per hour versus 63 feet at 20 miles per hour. So, you know, how many crashes does that prevent? How many injuries or serious injuries or potential deaths does that prevent? We'll never know. So to close, 13 years of progress by layering in these improvements year over year, really mostly through the city's repaving program. Every city in the country, most cities in the world have some form of pavement management program where you're maintaining the quality of your asphalt streets, using that as an opportunity to layer in these safety improvements or dedicated bicycle facilities, things like that. Every time you have one of those projects come up, is something that any city can do, and you don't have to have a lot of resources to do it. As I think we documented here, you can do it on the cheap through lower cost materials. And then someday, if you have more resources, you can always upgrade that to a higher spec. And so that's pretty much Hoboken's story. I hope you all appreciated it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. I think that when you were speaking, almost every minute, not every minute, every half a minute, you had a different idea. My God, it's really, because that is how it saves lives. You know, when you have a small island, people saw a small island on the crosswalk that Ryan showed. Well, you eliminate 56% of the incidents. 56, more than half of the incidents are totally disappear if you put that small island on the crosswalk, because not everybody can cross in one traffic light. So if they need 2 traffic lights to cross, so that was, and I also loved about your concept, you know, do it as good as you can. And if it's not perfect, it's okay. You can improve it when you get a little bit more money. And also when Ryan said 20 miles per hour citywide, that's 30 kilometers an hour citywide. It's really, really impressive. And you know, the issue is how many people are you willing to kill? The other day, a mayor of a city told me, oh, Gil, we went down from 50 kilometers an hour to 40. I said, well, you know, that's good, but it's not as good as it could be, because at 30, if a driver hits you at 30 kilometers an hour or 20 miles an hour, there is 5% probability of being killed. At 50 kilometers or 40 miles, it's over 80%. So it's really, it's not a technical issue. We know what happens. It's a political issue. How many people are we willing to allow to be killed? Ryan, thank you very much. And people, keep in mind in your questions that this is, even if you live in a city of 5 million people, when you got 60,000, it's like your neighbor or your ward or your borough. How it has been done. Thank you, Ryan. Amazing. And now we have a bigger city, Seattle. And also Seattle is doing a lot of very interesting things. And we have Allison and Bradley who are going to do the presentation on Seattle. And once they're finished, we're going to go through your questions. We already have a few of them. Keep putting your questions. Thank you. Allison, Bradley, go ahead. Tell us who you are and tell us about Seattle.
So thanks so much, Gil. Thank you, Ryan. I got to go on that ride last October that was featured in the video, and it was a really wonderful thing to experience in real life. I recommend, if anybody here finds themselves in New York, to take a short train ride over the river and see what's going on. We've been pointing to Hoboken's great work in many of our internal conversations that we have and in our external presentations as well. So I just want to say to Ryan, thanks for your leadership and for emphasizing that this work really isn't rocket science. We know the tools that work and we got to keep pushing forward on them. So I'm Allison Schwartz. I she, her pronouns. I'm with the City of Seattle Department of Transportation. We have the privilege and honor of being the Vision Zero program coordinator, and I'm here with my teammate Brad Topol, and we're going to share a little bit about what's happening in Seattle. And I just want to point out that, we've got a number of photos here highlighting kind of the different people that use our transportation system in Seattle, from our youngest travelers. Those are 2 of my kids on the far left, to our elders. And so really just a big fan of what you're doing, Gil. And thank you so much for inviting us into this space and having us here. So I want to take a moment to share our team's ethos. At the core of the work that we do is harm reduction. And we want to move towards streets that welcome everyone to get around comfortably, to get around with dignity and without fear. We very intentionally center our work on human beings. These are not just data points. These are our neighbors, our friends. In some instances, they're people that we know and our loved ones. We specifically center our efforts on the most vulnerable travelers and the most marginalized community members. And when we center on them, we believe we can improve safety for everyone. And lastly, we believe that Vision Zero and safety isn't just about transportation, that it connects directly to our work in equity and our work in sustainability. In Seattle, which is on the other side of the country from Hoboken, In Seattle, like maybe in your city, we have some big goals. We're working to end traffic deaths and serious injuries on our city streets by 2030. We're aiming for 90% of personal trips to be zero emission in that same time frame. And we're working to end racial disparities and achieve racial equity. No big deal, we're gonna get there. In our work in safety, we also have an opportunity to advance our work in equity and in climate, but we have to choose to do that. So in the American context, Seattle is a leader in transportation safety, but I also want to note that we're one of the best of the worst, given where the US lies in comparison with much of the rest of the world. These charts on the screen are from a November 2022 New York Times piece. I took the liberty of copy editing the chart on the left. These are not accidents. They are preventable crashes. And we see that other countries and other cities are making much greater progress than the US. What we
Allison,
saw during the pandemic. Yeah, go ahead, Gil.
No, I just wanted to highlight that the US is the worst, but Canadians, we are also almost as bad because and I want to tell countries, we should always benchmark, also cities, within cities. We need to benchmark with cities that are better than us. Because I mean, Seattle, if Seattle was benchmarking only with cities that are worse, I mean, Seattle could find in 10 minutes 500 cities that are worse than Seattle. But if you benchmark with cities that are worse, eventually you're going to look like those. So no, let's always benchmark with cities that are better, with neighborhoods that are better, with countries that are better. Because it's really shameful where not only the US, but also Canada, we also have people here from watching from Australia and Mexico and so on. So it's not that the US, because sometimes in Canada we say, oh, but we're not as bad as the US. Well, that's not an indicator on when you are talking about the road deaths during the pandemic. So thank you, Allison, for showing those numbers, because we must do better. And always, everyone, please keep in mind, benchmark with communities that are better than you. Similar communities, but the ones that are doing better. And then eventually you are going to be better. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Thank you, Gil. So just like a lot of other cities in the United States, minus Hoboken and a few other places, we are unfortunately seeing fatal and serious injury trends climbing. So this chart is showing fatalities by how people are getting around, and people walking are the most affected. And the dashed lines are showing the trend lines overall too. We see that people for walking, rolling and biking, those trends are increasing, while those for people protected by vehicles are declining. And just for context, our population here is just over 730,000 people. Despite these overall trends, we have seen that where we put in place speed reduction treatments, or where we've reduced crossing distances, where we've created separation between people inside and outside of vehicles, many of the tools that Ryan highlighted in his presentation, we are seeing positive changes. So that tells us very clearly that we need to do more of what works many more places more quickly, and then we can begin to see these trends change. And to get there, we're shifting to a safe system approach, which has been touted a lot recently and elevated thanks to the US Department of Transportation. We're working to move away from an individual level of blame toward more holistic shifts to systems level change. And in Seattle, we're actively moving beyond the traditional 3 E's of engineering, education, and enforcement, and we're focusing more on safer roads and safer speeds by design. We're also thinking about this element here on this chart of safer people, and of one of these themes around the outside edge, that responsibility is shared. We have a responsibility as people who are designing, operating, and managing a system. I have a responsibility to do that, and responsibility is shared, but not equally. I say that because I don't want people to think that my 9-year-old child has the same responsibility as I do, or that the person driving a large heavy truck has, the same responsibility as my 75-year-old mom does crossing the street. We have, scaled levels of responsibility, and we really need to take that into account in our work. So in addition to that safe systems framework, we're also looking to the Centers for Disease Control for guidance in how we frame and how we approach traffic violence. And we want to look at the most effective ways to address it. So the image on the left here is from the Centers for Disease Control. It's often used in workplace safety settings. And then one of our amazing advocates here in Seattle a few years ago on Twitter adapted it, and we like to look to this because I believe that we can embrace the safe systems framework and build on it and push on it. We can focus on the engineering level, this yellow kind of band here, and we have to look at the 2 levels above it. We have to start talking about the elephant in the room that is the car, that is a hazard to human beings, especially when it's larger, especially when it's moving at greater speeds. So we need to look to remove the hazard, replace the hazard with things like transit and safe separated infrastructure for walking and biking if we're going to meet both our safety and our climate goals. So I want to pause for just a moment and ask you all this question. And I want you to think about it for a moment. What does it mean for you to feel safe moving around your community? Each of us has our own experience and our own perspective that is really greatly shaped by who we are, you know, our gender identity, our ability, our race, our age, and also how people perceive us. So a lot of words coming up on the screen here. These are quotes from engagement work that we've been doing with a community partner that is engaging specifically with Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities here in Seattle to explore this question. And I'm just going to read one of them out loud because I think they're all very powerful. But in this yellow box here, it says, "Safety to me is being able to move with ease, without anxiety, without having to have the talk with my 3 boys before we go out. Public safety means I don't have to be fearful of white people or the police. Public safety is being free to have fun and thrive in Seattle." So I want to share these because as people working in transportation safety or public health or many other fields, but especially us, we can no longer stay in a narrowly defined lane of traffic safety. Our work really has to be intersectional. And for us, that has meant being open to redefining safety in a way that recognizes that many harms are occurring in the right of way, including from different forms of enforcement that we as transportation safety professionals have relied on. So I want to recognize some of our community partners in this work. These are wonderful people working in community. On the left is an organization called Whose Streets, Our Streets, and we are working in formal paid partnership with them. They're leading conversations like on the previous slide, and also conversations on automated enforcement, on youth and elders needs, and on the transportation safety needs of people experiencing homelessness. On the right are some of our colleagues alongside members of our Transportation Equity Work Group, which has been working for several years to put together an equity framework to guide our work. I just want to elevate that it's really important that we compensate community for their expertise, that we uplift community voices that aren't typically represented, and that's how we're going to create a more just Seattle. So a lot of the conversations we're having with these groups are related to enforcement and transportation safety, and Brad's going to talk a little bit more about that.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, so let's talk about enforcement. First, let's talk about in-person enforcement. So what we've been seeing, I mean, specifically in the United States, but what you can see around the world, is a bias within policing, right? Is that there's whether there's an implicit or an explicit, there can be a bias with in-person policing that is problematic, that causes harm to our communities, and that can elevate simple traffic stops from a broken taillight or an expired license plate or expired registration into an act of violence and into an act of people dying at the end of the day. And so nationally in the US, and I know in many other places, we've kind of been hearing about this pivoting from in-person enforcement that we know that we see the harm that it's causing, and that there is a surprising lack of any data that shows in-person effectiveness. That there's a big pivot to automated enforcement, and that the idea that cameras are blind, and that they are a quote equitable change to enforcement. Go ahead, next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about automated enforcement. First of all, it is effective as a way to reduce traffic collisions. In Seattle and nationally, we see speed light cameras and red light cameras typically do reduce the number of crashes, or specifically the number of serious injury and fatal collisions. However, we have to acknowledge that it also causes harm at the same time. It causes a financial harm to communities. And so this is a unique kind of place where we can increase safety and provide a benefit to communities and increase harm at the same time using the same treatment. And we need to be aware of that, and we need to be able to balance it. The little purple circle chart, this is kind of the Seattle story around automated enforcement. If we start at the bottom and move backwards in time, you know, what we're seeing is today we've done a racial equity analysis citywide of our automated enforcement. We're seeing financial burdens being placed specifically on our communities of color. And because those communities have been targeted for camera enforcement. Well, why do we do that? Well, 10 or 15 years ago, when we were really starting to push heavily for safety in Seattle, we started looking at all of the crashes around the city and saying, where are we seeing the most crashes? Where are we seeing the biggest problems? Let's place those cameras in those areas. And we weren't looking at community demographics, and we weren't looking at kind of these extra factors. What ended up happening is we ended up placing almost of, if not, you know, 80 or 90% of our cameras in those communities of color, because historically, those roads are the least safe because we didn't invest in them because of racial housing prejudice, or what we call redlining in the US. And that's just something that's really problematic. Another thing around speed, specifically speed enforcement, that we've kind of started to talk about a little bit is if you're placing a speed camera on a road that's already really dangerous and is already really busy, that you haven't taken the time to implement engineering treatments, you know, is that almost like a form of entrapment where we as a government, as a municipality, haven't made the road safe enough, haven't made the road feel like you should be traveling at slower speeds, and then we're putting speed cameras up there and penalizing people for a road that's designed to feel like you should drive fast. And so I just want to illuminate that a lot of times people are pivoting to automated enforcement as the answer to traffic safety when it comes to enforcement. I encourage everyone to just take an extra step and be a little more thoughtful around this, and also understand that punitive measures the best route forward? Is that the most effective route forward? Are there other things you can be doing first? I'll say in Seattle, one of the big things we've been finding is what are all the other ways we can reduce harm around ticketing while still increasing effectiveness? And so we're looking at things like extending warnings and definitely making sure that we're coming back to camera locations and increasing in engineering treatments and things like that. So we're talking about doing more. Allison mentioned that where we do things, they work. How do we do more things that work across the city? So I want to talk about kind of the historic kind of traditional system of being reactive and targeted versus what we're the safe systems approach, which is a more proactive approach. So when we talk about being reactive and targeted, you know, historically, you basically wait for a serious crash or a fatality to happen, and then you take action, right? Then you have the political means, then you have the pressure from the community to do something, and then you do it, right? And so what's problematic was that is you have to wait for death and suffering to happen first. It can be really slow and expensive because you're constantly chasing your tail. And even then, even if there's not a fatality, and you're just trying to implement some sort of safety treatment, a lot of time, at least I'll give you the example from our city government experience, is that you spend a lot of time justifying, proving, collecting data, basically proving why safe things are safe. You burn a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources. And to be honest, when we do like crash reviews, and you know, historically, it's not uncommon for you to look at a crash review and say, oh, well, someone wasn't following the rules, then they died. What do you do if people aren't going to follow the rules? And it completely ignores the idea around that the systems, that people behave differently in different systems. And when we have an unsafe system or an unsafe environment, people may speed faster, people may cross the road against a pedestrian signal because we have a really long cycle length, and it's not encouraging, it's not a pro-pedestrian environment. And so being reactive and targeted takes tons of time and isn't helping us progress our goals as fast as we could be. So if we move to our safe systems approach and being proactive, we can do things much faster. So instead of taking that isolated location, let's take a treatment. Instead of doing a traffic analysis or a crash analysis at a specific intersection or a specific street, let's look citywide. And let's look at those crash patterns that are happening across the city. So this is things where we're looking at treatments like slower speed limits. We have a treatment called leading pedestrian intervals, which is basically turning on a pedestrian walk signal first before cars get the green light, which makes it safer. We're looking at things like banning right turns on red, where in the US it's mostly allowed for you to be able to turn right on red. And so what we're doing is we're taking that similar level of staff effort and we're doing a citywide analysis and saying, you know what, we see people walking and biking and rolling being hit in this type of environment, in this type of system that we've created. And so now we can have a policy discussion and we can have a similar number of staff input as we did for that single location, but now we're looking citywide. And so now when we move to design and implementation, instead of designing and implement at one intersection or one block or one street or 1 mile or kilometer, now we're looking at doing everything systemically. And so this makes it much more better efficient use of our staff time. It's way cheaper because we're not burning all this time to collect data and continue to prove that safety is safe. And we're targeting these risks, we're targeting based on risk factors before they materialize into crashes. Because we're saying, hey, we see a lot of people walking, getting hit in this environment. Let's take everywhere that environment exists in the city, whether or not it's showing a crash pattern, and just pump those types of treatments in. And at the end of the day, I've personally noticed that it really encourages empathy and shifts in the built system. So there's tons of examples I could give for this, but the one big example was our citywide speed limit reduction. So in 2020, we reduced most of our citywide speed limits from 30 miles an hour to 25, which is around 50 kilometers per hour to 30. And what you see here is for years and years, our Vision Zero program started in 2015, that we were doing mile by mile, kilometer by kilometer, we were doing individual projects, and we were having to justify every single one of those projects and put in a lot of staff time. In 2019, we had a big citywide discussion. We created a policy doc where we got everyone in the room who was for and against it or who had concerns around it. And we worked through all those issues, and it was hard and it took time and it was difficult. But at the end of the day, we ended up with a system that we could build really fast, that was actually really cheap and quick to install. We were installing these signs for about $4,000 a mile, and we coded about 70% of our city. And the results were that we saw reduced collisions and injuries by about 20% at those locations, which we did citywide. So we saw a big reduction in collisions at some of those places. And that's it for the Seattle presentation. Thank you very much.
Wow, this was amazing. So much information and so practical, so usable. We have learned how to eliminate people being killed by drivers in cities, by dual actions, such as allowing pedestrians an 8-second head when they are crossing, such as eliminating right turns on red, lowering the speed citywide 20 miles an hour or 30 kilometers an hour, doing road diets. It's doable. It's not really a technical issue. We have seen that it's doable. It's not a financial issue. This doesn't cost a lot of money. It's a political issue, but not of political parties. All political parties should be on board because people are dying of left and right of any political party. So let's make an effort. The ideal time to have safe streets probably was 50 years ago. The second best time is today. So let's take advantage of all of the knowledge and the tools that we have learned today, and let's put it into practice. Please share this video with elected officials, advocates, media, with as many people as you can, because we need to get people on board that having safe streets is possible, is doable. Thank you very much for attending today. Thanks, Allison and Bradley and Ryan and everyone. See you in 2 weeks.